I don't know about you, when I'm looking for a plumber, I like to read my reviews. HomeAdvisor.com gave me some reviews on our sponsor, Art of Plumbing. Called them. They arrived on time. Immediately found the plumbing issue and fixed it right the first time. I called them last year and it was great. I called them again this year because I had a problem again. They came out, they fixed the problem. They even gave me solutions to help stop the problem in the future at 541-9405.
Hey, come take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome, of course, into Other People's Shoes. I'm your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Super excited. I always liked the state of Texas. One of these days, maybe I need to really go out there, like physically go out there. But thank you, COVID-19, for allowing that not to happen. Wah, wah, wah. Any event, welcome in my guest today. She is a blogger at first, but then she's become this amazing podcaster, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. Compared to Me is something you guys want to go check out, or Compared to Who. Really, that is the latest thing that she's working on right now. She's a writer, she's a speaker. She's spoken to thousands of women each and every week. She inspires them to stop comparing themselves and find the true purpose in Christ. Her first book, Compared to Who, encourages women to uncover the spiritual root of body image. So that's where we're going to be kind of centering around today. So be excited about that. And how to find freedom from all of that. Her second book, Burden of Better, releases this September. We're excited to sit with her. She's a homeschool mom, shuttling kids to and fro. And I'm excited to hear more about this, maybe if it works in shopping for the clearance racks. What's all that about? That's exciting too. And of course, she was even on Netflix on a baking show. So much excitement here. Help me welcome in my guest, Heather Creekmore. Heather, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much. It's great to be here, Neil.
Well, thanks for coming in. We found you. I always like to tell people how we found people, which is maybe weird, but I don't know. It's a great segue. So we found Heather. Actually, she was interviewing one of our favorite guests, and that is Michelle Bankston. And guys, that is an episode to go check out. Those two together, dynamite. So go check that out. We'll link all that in our fun, exciting show notes. But Heather, we're super excited to sit with you today. Thanks for coming on. How are you in Texas today?
I'm glad to be here. We're doing great. The temperature is going to hit almost 100 today. So I don't know if that makes you jealous or happy you're not here.
I'm going to just leave that alone. I don't know how I feel about that. But yeah, in Oregon, it does get that hot in June and July and August. We'll see 100s sometimes, like 90s, high 90s. Sometimes we get over that 100 mark. But those places like in Arizona that go to like 120 and whatnot, why even count? Like after it's 100, I mean, does 120 feel any different than 105? I don't know.
It's just depressing, really.
Right? It is depressing. So you mentioned kids in your we mentioned your kids in your introduction. What are the ages, if you don't mind sharing?
No, we have 4 kids. Our oldest is 13 and a half. And then we've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and an almost 9-year-old. So if your listeners are good with math, I had 4 kids in just under 5 years. I had 4 under 4 for a few months. So we just knocked them right out.
I just feel like that deserves a badge of some sort of honor. I don't know. If we had one if we had one to give to you, we would give one out maybe. I don't know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You earned it. So, and then you mentioned I forgot to mention your husband is a fighter pilot, right? Turned pastor, and his name's Eric, and you guys live, of course, in the great state of Texas. So what's that about?
Yeah. So I married a Marine fighter pilot who had he had based his career decision on his favorite movie, which was Top Gun. And we got married. I guess it was a couple years. He actually became a believer, a follower of Jesus, when he was stationed in Kyrgyzstan during Operation Iraqi Freedom, or excuse me, Operation Enduring Freedom. I should get my operations right. But so he became a Christian over there and came back and kind of felt like maybe the Lord was calling him into ministry, but wasn't sure. We got married, and sure enough, his military career kind of started winding down, and he decided to go to seminary. And then a few years later, we planted a church, and the rest is history. He's been in ministry ever since.
Please tell me at your wedding you played You Lost That Love and Feeling.
You know what? I don't think we did.
If he's a Top Gun fan,
that was a myth.
you got to ask Eric. If he's a Top Gun fan, he needs to sing that to you at least once. At least once. Karaoke style.
Yeah. Him and singing don't really go well together.
You know, if you ever heard Tom Cruise in that movie, they didn't go well together either, but that's another story. One summer, my friends and I, we watched that on VHS. True story, VHS. If you don't know what that is, go Google that, kids.
No, I know.
No, I know you do, but for the kids, you know. We watched it every summer, every day on VHS. And there's a scene in Top Gun, I'm going to ruin it for those who haven't seen it, where Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis, I think is her name, they have a makeout scene or a love-making scene. You know, the song You Take My Breath Away comes on. We had to close our eyes during that song. Christian home. My buddy's parents were Christians, had to close our eyes. You know, there was no nudity, but, you know, it was implied. Anyway, I say all that because to this day, and making me think of Top Gun, to this day, that song comes on the radio, and I'm trying to figure out how to drive and close my eyes at the same time. Yeah. Not a good idea.
It's an instinct now.
Yeah, it is. It's just ingrained. It's just how it is. So that's fun. I love hearing stories like that. So that's just fantastic.
I was never allowed to watch the movie. So, I mean, I still am not sure if I've seen it the whole way through, but I know there's the new one coming out. I think it's this summer. So
yeah, maybe.
I guess I'll get to see that one.
Yeah. You should go watch the old one. It's good.
Okay.
Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
It's total 80s, though. You got to remember that. It's total 80s. So, okay. On to our most important question of all time, of course, and that's this. What size shoes do you wear?
Oh, well, you know, that's funny because I'm not actually sure anymore. You know, pregnancy changes things because I was a 7.5 my entire life. But now I think I'm like an 8.5, although my sneakers are a 9 and my dress shoes are like an 8. So I'm all over the place. I know that wasn't a very good answer, was it?
No, but you know, that's okay. We get an idea. And then is there a certain brand or style you like more than another?
You know, I have been wearing Crocs. Now, not the ones that like, you know, that they became famous with, the, I don't know what you would call them, the slide-in ones. But I like the pretty Crocs, like the sandal ones, the ones that look like real shoes. And when people say, I like your shoes, I'm able to say, oh, they're Crocs. So I'm a big fan. They're really comfortable.
Wow. I don't know how I feel about Crocs. It's the one shoe I can't get behind. I'm a shoe nut. If you haven't heard any past shows, upwards of 50 pairs of shoes.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sitting in the studio now and I'm looking at just the special shoes that don't go out to the garage. And there are currently, let's see, 8 pairs that don't ever go out to the garage where all the other shoes live. They get to stay in the house. So, yeah.
So, Neil, my first job was in the JCPenney shoe department. And that summer, I think I purchased 40 pairs of shoes. I did not make a lot of money that summer. But so I feel ya.
My wife just transitioned our closet into, so there's a mention, honey, into her special shoes are now on the top rack of our closet. And so I'm like, well, that's better than them being on the ground. At least your shoes get to be on a shelf. Mine sit on the ground next to my podcasting equipment. And anyway, priorities. Anyway, that's not what we came to talk about. But talking about this, right? This whole idea of, you know, you comparing your shoe collection to my shoe collection, we play this comparison game, right? Whether it be with shoes, whether it be with clothing, whether it be with whatever. Why do we play this game so often, in your opinion?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a couple reasons. And the first one is I think we're trying to affirm whether or not we're normal, whether or not we're okay, right? And then beyond that, I think it morphs into, well, am I acceptable? And comparison, I think, really becomes the way that we're trying to figure out if we have any value or what our value is. And so we compare ourselves to others, maybe shoe collections or homes or what we look like physically or how well behaved our children are or how good our marriage is, at least on our Instagram date night pics. There's all these different ways that we compare ourselves to other people. And I think the reason we do it is our hearts are asking a question. They're saying, am I okay? And we use comparison and we try to figure out, okay, well, am I okay? Well, I guess I'm okay compared to that person. But then we might find someone who's doing what we perceive as better than we're doing. And then we kind of split back down into, oh, well, maybe I'm not doing okay anymore. And it's just comparison can become this vicious cycle that traps us in a place where we're always trying to figure out the answer to that question. Am I okay? Am I valuable? Am I worthy? And that's why I think it can be so dangerous.
Those feel like very dangerous questions to ask ourselves. Mm-hmm. Am I okay? Right? Am I worthy? Mm-hmm. Am I valuable? Am I, whatever? And so what happens when we get into that mindset of we're always comparing, always looking for, you mentioned Instagram. I mean, obviously social media gets a very bum rap and rightfully so. Mm-hmm. But why is it that we get into this, like I said, this mindset of we just constantly are comparing? Like we're constantly looking at someone else's life thinking, I want that life. Why don't I have that life? Why isn't my grass green? Why do I have weeds in my yard? Why?
Yeah. Well, I think it really comes down to a lot of us need to do more work, myself included, right? Like this is a human problem, not a specific person problem. But we need to figure out who we really are and where our identity is found. And what happens to us so easily as people is we look around and we see what we believe is giving other people value, what's giving other people some sort of solid ground for their identity. And we think, oh, I need that too. Then I would feel more like I'm on more solid ground. Then I would feel better about myself. I would feel more certain of who I am or more confident. And all of these different ways that we compare ourselves are really just ways that we put ourselves on more unstable surfaces for like, I'm just picturing quicksands, really. We just watched The Princess Bride. We talked about old movies. We just watched The Princess Bride with our kids this weekend. And, there's a scene where Buttercup like sinks into the quicksand really quickly. And I feel like all of these ways we compare ourselves, they're just quicksand. They're not stable. Like you're going to fall in that trap if you decide you want to, derive your identity or your worth on whether or not your house is as nice as your neighbor's or, or your body is as good as, the woman on TV's body, that kind of thing. And so really the stem of it is we need to know who we are and whose we are and where our identity is found. And then that's really only cure, I would say, for comparing ourselves to others and for breaking ourselves out of that trap, because it is so easy to do. Just spend our lives comparing ourselves to everyone we see and meet and, and everyone who passes through our social media feeds.
Okay. So I know you're not a doctor, but you kind of sound like a doctor there. So Michelle's rubbing off on you maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
So shout out to Michelle Banks, and we love you. So I was a kid, and maybe you're like this. So if you're not, then don't raise your hand to this. Of course, I can't see if you're raising your hand or not. So we're going to just trust you that you are, maybe or not. So I was a kid that grew up, military background. My dad's a Marine, whatnot. My mom's working hard, doing the daycare thing. And, first chance I got when I got that first job, not as glorious as JCPenney's, by the way, McDonald's. So there it is. And, but I remember getting that first paycheck, and man, the first thing I did is I started buying name brand clothes. Mm. Why did I buy name brand clothes? I wonder. Did I, in my mind, think if I buy name brand clothes, I'm going to be somebody. Somebody's going to look at my clothes and go, oh, you're wearing Adidas, which I was really into Adidas back then. Everything I owned was Adidas, every shirt, everything. And now it's North Carolina. I mean, it's transitioned. And if I can get a pair of Jordans, I think I'm pretty hot stuff because they're Jordans, they're name brand, everything that comes with that. Why on earth would I ever have that mindset of I need this thing, I need that, I need this status to get to this point? And I feel like not only me, but maybe you and maybe others are searching so desperately hard to find that thing. So maybe for you, is there something in your life that you searched for that you just never did find?
Well, I think the question we're trying to answer in our hearts, the reason why we buy the name brand clothes, is the question is, am I acceptable? Right? Because in certain circles, likely for you in high school, the other kids were probably wearing Adidas. And so that's what you needed to fit in. Whereas if you were in a, I don't know, a country club group of some, I don't know. I can't even think of any more snobbish brands. That's how brand illiterate I am at
Polo.
this point.
Yeah, Polo.
Polo, there you go. Yeah.
Abercrombie and Fitch.
There you go.
Lacrosse.
Yeah.
Or Lacoste.
So
Lacoste with the alligator. Yeah.
Yeah, with the little alligator. That was big in the 80s too. But depending on what group you're in is what is going to, help you be part of that group. Will you be acceptable to that group? And so I think a lot of our decisions as to what's acceptable are based on people around us. Now, the question you asked me was whether or not I've ever felt like I was trying to be acceptable or trying to fit in and didn't quite meet it. And, that's a really important part of my story because I struggled with my body image starting in third grade.
Third grade?
Third grade, I remember in third grade, my mom had bought me these pink pleather pants. And pleather, I think they call it vegan leather now. But it's basically fake leather. And so I remember I begged my mom for these pants, and I got these pants on. And I remember looking at myself and thinking my legs looked really big in pink pleather pants. And from that point on, I was always on a diet. I mean, fasting, very disordered behaviors when it came to food, to the point of where if I hadn't grown up in the late 80s, early 90s, especially when I was in college, early 90s, I very much had an eating disorder, but it wasn't anorexia or bulimia. And so in the early 90s, we really only had two categories that were universally known as eating disorder categories. And I didn't fit in either one of them. So I just thought I was normal. But I was on a quest to fit in, but in a more broad, cultural way, right? I thought I needed to look like one of those women on the cover of a magazine. Now, I wouldn't have told you that. Like, that would have been lunacy. Like, I wasn't conscious of it. But as I remember back, that was very much who I wanted to look like. The women on television, the women in the movies, the women on the magazine covers, those are the women that I believed had better lives because of the way they looked. And so if that was the ticket to having a better life, then that's what I wanted to do. That's who I wanted to fit in with. And it was a quest for decades. Even after I got married, because at some point in there, I believed that, I was single through my 20s. I'll back that up a little bit. I was single through my 20s. And so I believed that I didn't look good enough to get married. And then as soon as I met my husband, I thought, okay, well, now all these body image issues will be finished, right? Like, I'll be fixed because I answered the question. I am good enough to get married. And I got married, and sure enough, my body image issues just continued. I still struggled. I still wanted to look better. And then I had kids, and then it was an uphill battle. but so yes, I mean, I definitely, I understand what it means to be on a journey to try to be acceptable and comparing myself to other women along the way. And, compared to some, I was acceptable in my mind, but then compared to others, I was unacceptable. And really what I like to say is comparison's ladder has no top rung, because you can keep climbing and keep climbing and keep climbing, and comparison's never going to let you be done. There's always going to be someone that's, a couple rungs above you. And so you got to just keep climbing. And it's a dead end. It really is.
Yeah, so we started our season 5, the one you're in now, and I really was struggling with where do I want to take the show. And Garrett and I were brainstorming back and forth, and I kept coming back to, we talked about identity, we talked about vision as we started the year, and we talked about, ideas of people being on this journey that, when you're finding this identity, this cost to you, that it all has a cost, right? When you start out on any journey, there's a cost to it, right? But I loved your word there. You said quest. And I love that. And I think we all, and I think everyone can raise their hand to this. They should, if they're being honest with themselves, that they really are on a quest to really figure out and search out, part of that search is a quest, right? Is to search out who they are. And I think so many times, and if I'm hearing you correctly, so many times people just are searching for the next thing. It's almost like a fix. And you talk about your body image, obviously how you struggle with that, not feeling like you were ever worthy enough to get married, which to me is lunacy, but whatever. It's your thing. I'm not judging. I'm just thinking that's crazy that someone would think that. Not that you're crazy again, but just it is what it is, right? And so all that is that I'm trying to figure out is, are we brainwashed as a society, or are we more tricked, or are they the same?
Well, you know what? Actually, I think that the culture does play a huge role in convincing us of some of these things, but I really think it's our hearts where the struggle lies. I really think that our hearts are bent towards idolatry. We're bent towards the quick fix. We're bent towards, I like to call it chasing unicorns, right?
I love that phrase. Can I steal that? That is a great phrase. Chasing unicorns. Oh, that's my favorite phrase now. I'm going to start saying that. Thank you for that. Keep going.
Sure. But it's like we believe and we tell ourselves these lies all the time, right? Like, it is that next thing that will make me happy. So the single person is probably sitting in their home today saying, as soon as I get married, I'll be happy. And the married person is sitting in their home, not sure that that's true. And maybe saying, well, if we could just have kids, then our life would be perfect. And then the person with like toddlers and babies is saying, if I could just get these kids potty trained, then I'd be happy. Or maybe you're the guy sitting behind a desk saying, if I could just get that corner office, then I'd be happy. I mean, we convince ourselves that it is the next thing. For women I work with, if I could just lose the 20 pounds, if I could just lose the 70 pounds, if I could just firm up this flab, if I could, just get a house like Joanna Gaines would build me, and there's always the next thing. And we, in our hearts, idolize all these ideals. I like to say that idealization is idolization. We make all these things our ideal. Like, if I could just be like that, if I could just do that. And what we create for ourselves are these little idols. And then these little idols run our lives, right? Because I believe that, there's a reason why God says we should have no other gods before him really early in the 10 Commandments, which is to say the first one. It's because we are so tempted always to just follow these idols wherever they take us and do what they command. And so in my story, I followed the idol of body image. I thought that if I could just get that body, then I would have all I ever wanted and dreamed of. I would have peace, love, security. Everyone would love me. I'd never have any problems. And I mean, it sounds so loony to say out loud because it's not really things I was conscious of, but very much at the heart of my desire was believing that this idol, this having a better body, would serve me in a way that really only God can serve me. And I think that's what we do when we look around, we compare ourselves, we decide what would make our lives better, and we really create all these little idols for ourselves that ultimately just let us down, right? Because an idol can never satisfy.
How do we fix that? Because again, going back to your phrase, right? Going back to your phrase, which I'm going to now tweet out everywhere to our 7 followers on Twitter. Chasing unicorns. Are you chasing a unicorn? So great, profound. But I'm serious. Like, it's fun to laugh about that. But I firmly believe in what you're saying because again, Chip Ingram, I don't know if you know that guy or not. He's out here in California, but he talks about this contentment issue, this searching issue that the horizon keeps moving. Same kind of idea, right? You're never reaching the horizon because it just keeps moving on you. But how do we fix that?
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk about it as the treadmill that never stops, right? And for beauty or for body image, it's like the idol tells you you lose the weight, and then you lose the weight. It's like, oh, well, it's a shame, you're kind of flabby still, you got extra skin, so you take care of that or whatever. And then, oh, well, it's a shame about your nose. Okay, so you go get the rhinoplasty, and oh, it's a shame you still have, your hair's not quite right. Okay, so you fix your hair. And there's always one more thing, right? And so I think the only way you can hop off the treadmill is to call out the idol and recognize, like, you really have to see the lie for what it is, that it's a lie. Like, there's definite health advantages to taking care of yourself physically. Like, I'm not saying that calling out the idol means that you never worry about your body again, you never look in a mirror again. I mean, all that's ridiculous. That's taking it too far. But I do think that when you call out the idol, you say, you know what? Ultimately, changing my body isn't going to give me the love, peace, joy, everything that I hope it will give me. It's ultimately not going to work. And that's a lie. And it's a lie that our culture reinforces, unfortunately, to kind of loop back to what you asked me before. But calling it out as a lie. And then I believe we have to repent and say, sorry, I'm sorry, God. I've been chasing that lie and only you're going to satisfy me. And maybe it's the idol of work. I mean, this is a big struggle for me as well. I love work. I love to work, but I can work and work and work and work and work and realize at the end of the day that I'm working so hard because I think if I work more, I'll ultimately be able to rest. But it doesn't work that way. Our idols don't work that way. They just say you need to work more, work more, work more. And we've got this loving Father, this loving Heavenly Father who's saying, no, I've given you rest already. You don't have to work so hard. Like, just rest in my rest. And so I think by calling out that idol, by repenting, asking God to forgive us or chasing the idol instead of chasing hard after him, then I think we can set a new course and kind of come back to recognizing that really our joy and our satisfaction and our contentment will only come through Christ alone. Every other avenue we try to find it in is just going to leave us on a treadmill, wanting more, and never being satisfied.
So, youth background, that's my background. Trying to teach kids the 10 Commandments. I love that you're bringing that up. That's awesome. So I was always trying to think of creative ways that we could get them to, stick, right? Or, firm up in their mind. And so you mentioned the 10 Commandments, right? So we would do this picture thing. So I can email you this if it translates out. I might have to handwrite it out and take a picture of it so it translates okay. But if you know the 10 Commandments, right? So we go down to all of them. I won't recite them all. Somebody can go do that for me and know them all. But number 10 we know is don't covet. You and I both know that. So what we would do is we would take the 10 and we would make a 1 on the paper and we would draw a line, like a fraction, like a back, I guess it's backspace on the keyboard. And then we'd put the 0, if you're following me. So we got your skinny neighbor on one side, kind of a fence in between them, the line being the fence. The skinny neighbor saying, hey, I want to be like my fat neighbor, right? And the fat neighbor saying, hey, I want to be like my skinny neighbor, right? And so this teaching the kids to covet, don't covet. You don't want to, want something else that somebody else has. So as you're saying all of this, I'm thinking to myself, man, that's our picture. We're looking over the fence going, man, I want what my neighbor has. Oh, no, I want what they have. I want this. Or in ministry, especially in church. I know your husband's a pastor. How many people probably think on a Sunday morning, I can do better than Eric does. Mm-hmm. I could speak better than Eric. Why is Eric the only one up there that gets to speak and talk on God's behalf? I'm just as good as Eric is. I'm sure I am. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So how do we have some practical steps? And I know you kind of talked about some, right? You gotta name it, right? You gotta apologize, and then you gotta kind of run from that. But is there any other steps that we may have missed?
Yeah. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, we love stories.
So Eric and I were headed to a pastor's conference. This was when we lived in Dallas, and we were at the Dallas Fort Worth Airport, DFW Airport, big airport. And Eric, like I said, he's a Marine, and we're both firstborns. We're both super type A, and so we were there.
Enneagram ones, are both of you guys on the Enneagram?
No, he's a 3. Yeah, he's a 3. I'm actually a 7, which confuses people, but I know it's true.
Right. It's fine. My wife and I were talking about that actually when I was telling her that we were having you come on, and I said, I wonder what number she is, and I started describing her because she's really into that, and she tells me everybody's numbers, and she goes, well, if she's like this, she might be this, and I'm like, yeah, I think she's a 1 though, I really think, and she's like, she may not be, and I'm a 4, so there it is. So anyway, back to your story.
Well, you need to watch my episode of Nailed It on Netflix, and then you will see.
I'm going to. I mean that. Like, I'm going to try to find sometime today to go watch that. So anyway, back to your
Season 1,
story.
Episode 1. My story. So we're waiting at DFW for a flight to Miami. And I was in the middle of writing my first book, but I was actually writing a chapter on comparison. And I was sitting in the airport and I was watching people walk through the airport. And what I noticed was people don't walk through the airport like they're lost. Like, for the most part, people walk through the airport like they're on a mission, right? They know exactly where they're going. I mean, maybe it's to the bathroom, maybe it's to the food court, but for the most part, they're headed to a specific gate or the exit to rental cars or whatever. But people walk with a sense of determination through an airport. And so then I started to think about, like, how people, because we were sitting where people were coming through security and kind of funneling into the airport from the security line. And I started to think about how those people knew where to go in the airport. And it's like, well, they know where to go because stamped on their boarding pass is their gate number, right? So they go through security, they have their boarding pass, and it has their destination written on it. So they get into the airport and they go specifically to that destination. And I am getting to a point here. So I was sitting there thinking, like, well, isn't it interesting that they're able to walk with confidence and determination because they know exactly where they're going, and how ridiculous it would be, because my boarding pass, said flight whatever to Miami, how ridiculous it would be for me to walk through the airport, looking at every gate, saying, oh, you know what? I'm supposed to go to Miami, but Maui's probably much better than Miami.
It
maybe
is.
I'll go there. or like walking through the airport, stopping at each gate thinking, oh, well, wouldn't that be nice? Oh, well, maybe I should do that instead. I mean, it's not an option, right? You don't get that option in the airport. Your boarding pass is stamped Miami. You're going to Miami unless you do something formally to change it. And I started to think that for us, one of our biggest reasons why we struggle with comparison is because we don't know where we're supposed to be going. We don't know what's stamped on our boarding pass. We don't know what our purpose is. And for me, this is a really silly example, but I'm going to say it because it's normally well received when I say it. But when I found out that God didn't stamp my boarding pass for me to be a supermodel, I mean, I'm barely 5'6". It was freeing. It was like, okay, wait a second here. Why should I walk through the airport of life trying to keep up with this supermodel or maybe this actress or name whomever? Why should I walk through the airport of life saying, oh, well, I could be like that, or if I could be like that? I mean, that is the way to not have confidence, right? To lose all sense of determination. But when you know what stands on your boarding pass, then you get into that airport scenario of life, and you can walk confidently without having to worry about what's going on at everyone else's gate and whether or not she's ahead or behind or delayed or, whatever. You can just walk confidently towards what God has created you and intended you to do for him in the short days that we have here on earth. And I think that gives you freedom to stop comparing and start living.
Can I add to your story?
Sure.
We're free to fly.
Yeah, there you go.
We're
That's
free
good.
we're free to fly. No, think about it.
There you go.
We're free to fly because the payment has already been made. The
Right.
ticket's already been purchased. Right. You're free to fly. And I don't know about you, that was a great analogy. I followed you all the way there, and that was fantastic. So that's good stuff. Love that too. So you talk about being on Netflix. So we're going to go watch that later today. We'll of course link that in our show notes for those Netflix people out there. But that's so fun to me. So talk about why being on that show kind of changed you in a lot of respects, because it was nailed it, right? Did we nail that or did we miss that?
Nope, you got it.
Okay, perfect. So why was that true for you in life? How has that been true for you in life? Like, I know you always don't nail it, and you sure more probably often than not, like most of us, fail at it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And when you see my episodes, so I'm season 1, episode 1, and honestly, they shot the show as episode 3. And then when it was released, it was episode 1. And if you know anything about TV production and strategy of releasing shows. Anyway, long story short, my cake was so bad that they moved us up to episode 1. They thought it was a better hook. So that gives you a little bit of a preview of what's ahead when you watch it. But I tell you, my Nailed It experience, it was interesting from the perspective of comparison and perfection. I mean, it's God taught me on this journey for a number of years where he's been just breaking down walls where I thought I had to be perfect, look perfect, act perfect. But then at the same time, I've always had this kind of natural gravitation towards authenticity. Like I always just wanted to be real. And it was kind of the person even with my friends that wasn't afraid to just kind of speak the truth and be like, well, that's stupid because da-da-da-da. So I've always had that. But really what happened with Nailed It, if you don't mind me sharing, is that
not at all. Just don't give too much away. We want people to go watch it, right?
Yeah, no. I won't give it too much away. That was a lifelong dream of mine, something that I had never even articulated to my husband, what was to be on a baking show. Like when I was a kid, Food Network didn't exist, but my mom would sometimes get like Good Housekeeping and magazines with recipes in them. And there was the Pillsbury Bake Off that's been going on for, I don't know, probably 100 years. And I would always read that article about the Pillsbury Bake Off and be like, wow, that would be so awesome to be in a baking competition someday. But the truth is I'm a horrible baker. And I mean, I have a laundry list of absolutely embarrassing, horrible baking stories, like the time I baked the fork in the brownies. I thought it was odd that I couldn't find the fork after I was done stirring the brownie mix. And then when we cut into the brownies, the fork was in there. I mean, I have made some disastrous desserts and fed them to my family. And so I very much qualified for this baking show. But here in my heart, for decades, I've had this desire to be on a baking show, but I'm a horrible baker. So what baking show am I going to be on? Food Network's not calling horrible bakers like me to have their own shows. And so when I got the invitation to audition for Nailed It, it was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or not, but then I was like, this is my chance. Like, this is what I've always wanted to do. And it really was. There's been several times like this in my life, but it was one of those times where I felt like God was like, I know you, I see you, I know those hidden desires in your heart, and I love you, and I'm going to take care of you. And so it was a powerful reminder of how intimately God knows me. And even though the show is totally frivolous and fun, and no producer would have ever let me say anything like that to the camera while I was there, that's really the backstory of me being on Nailed It. It was just a fun way for God to say, hey, I love you, Heather.
Well, right. But it's also kind of a metaphor for life, right? Like
absolutely,
we are nailing stuff daily, and I'm sure we're failing at stuff daily as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, the show is a setup, actually. So, and they give you impossible things. So my last challenge was to make a wedding cake that the wedding cake designer who made this wedding cake, it took her 2 weeks to make the model we were supposed to make in 2 hours as amateurs. So, I mean, the show is a setup to be funny. And so, but yes, you're right. It's just every day we think, oh, I can get this perfect, or, oh, maybe I didn't get it perfect today, but tomorrow I'll get it more perfect, or I'll get it right. And it's just, we're all just kind of hobbling along. No one's really figured it out, I don't think. So.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to go watch it. So, talking about things that kind of rattle us and kind of shake us to our core, you were kind enough to provide a quote to us. And I got to be honest, when I read it, it really did kind of shake me and rattle me to my core. And the quote was this. And so I'm curious about maybe expounding on it a little bit more when we read this to you. Friendship is born at the moment when one person says to another, "What? You too? I thought I was the only one."
Yeah.
First off, why is that so impactful? And then, why should we maybe subscribe to that?
Yeah, well, I think so. It's a C.S. Lewis quote, and I believe that the enemy tries to keep our mouths shut and keep us from engaging in discussions of, in some cases, our frailty, our weakness, right? And in doing so and keeping us shut up, we really hinder our opportunity to have the kind of deep relationships that we need to have with each other. So the quote, I thought I was the only one, is this kind of what he says. You do that too. I thought it was, and that's something that I found. The more I share in my blog and podcasts and in my books, the more I share about like the messy stuff, like, oh yeah, I totally thought that or felt that or did that, the more people I have write me and say, oh, I thought I was the only one who ever thought that. Like, wow, I can't believe you put that in writing, but I feel better now. Because now I know I'm not alone. Now I know I'm not the only one who thinks that way or has thought that way or has done those ridiculous things. One thing that I shared about in my first book is I learned, because of disordered eating behaviors, I learned to never throw away like candy wrapper or cookie wrapper or any junk food wrapper. I would never put that on the top of the trash can. It sounds absolutely crazy, but that was just, I didn't want anyone to see that I had eaten that. And so if I finished off the carton of ice cream, I would pick up whatever trash was on top of the trash can and I would put it underneath. And when I shared about that in my first book, I got so many email messages from women saying, oh, that is like a loony behavior, but I do it too. And I didn't even know that anyone else did that, but I feel better now. I think I might be able to stop doing that now that I know other people do that and that my shame is covered. I don't have to have that kind of shame that manifests itself that way anymore. So yeah, I think there's something to us being real with each other, us not being afraid to talk about our struggles. And I think that there's real relationship, real authenticity, and real friendship lying on the other side of being real with each other and taking the risk of sharing our mess with each other and knowing that Jesus covers it all.
I think that's profound. I really do. And I think it is so much freeing, like you said, when somebody can come along and say, yeah, I've done that too. You're not alone. Because I think so many times we think we're alone in our suffering. We're alone in our thoughts. We're alone in our whatever's, our mess. I'm alone in my room. We're alone in isolation right now. We're alone. We're not meant to be alone. We're not created to be alone. And I think so many times, again, we get lied to when we're alone.
Yep.
I think more deception happens when we're alone. People think it's the crowd that comes with you. I don't think it is. I think it's in your head that when you're really alone and you're trapped alone. So
yep.
I think I said alone like 1,000 times there, but probably get some emails on that one too. But what brought you to the point, you talk about your book, and I know there's a new book coming out in September, and I want to give time for that as well. But what brought you to the point of writing not only the first one, but then the second one? Now, I know the first one's compared to who, right? And the second one is a burden of better. So you want to talk about both of those right now and the process of why you created those masterpieces?
Sure. Well, compared to who is just, it's my story and really the journey that God took me on out of decades of body image struggles. And really it was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't sit down to write a book about my body image struggles. I mean, those were things that I didn't really ever want to share with anyone. I loved to write, and I knew that I wanted to write a book and felt like God was calling me to write a book. So I sat down to write a book on marriage, and I just couldn't get the words out. And it was actually my husband who one day was just like, I don't know why you're trying to write about marriage. You need to write about body image. And I was like, no, I'm not sharing that. And, but he was right. And when I sat down and started to write a body image book, pretty much, I knocked the thing out in just a couple of weeks. And so it was just sharing my story and really trying to give hope to women who maybe like me had read all the other body image books. I'd read so many Christian books to try to help my body image issues and just never found answers that would satisfy me for longer than 24 hours. And so it's really just my testimony is what that book is. And then the second book kind of just as a broader look at some of our struggles. So the first book is very much focused on body image, even though the word compared is in the title. The second book is really more about comparison in general. Like, why do we compare, our everything to everyone else's everything? And really, so I take a look at what comparison really is, what drives us to comparison, very much like your first or second question for me today. And then how do we find a way out? How do we journey out of a life of comparison? And I talk really in depth about grace. I think there's 4 different kinds of grace that we see, ways that we see God working in our lives. And then we talk about contentment and rest and joy. How do we really find and live in joy? Because ultimately, I think that's how God designed us, and that's what He wants for us, so much more than the life of trying to keep up and always comparing. So that's what the new one's about, and it'll be out in September.
So, I'm going to play the other side of the fence here for a second. I know we're talking about comparing and not being on the other side of the fence, but come on, let's be real here. Really what we're centering around is just poor self-esteem, right? Everyone has this poor self-esteem, and really that's the root of the issue here. It's not really an idle thing that you're talking about. It really is just like, as a child, I had poor self-esteem. I even heard on the Animal Planet that animals can get poor self-esteem if you're mean to them, which is ludicrous. But no, really, isn't that what it's about? Just poor self-esteem?
Yeah, no. So here's the interesting thing. So you and I are both of the age where we grew up hearing that self-esteem was the answer to everything. But the fascinating thing is that though we grew up hearing that like on authority, right? It wasn't just Sesame Street saying it. It was the psychologists. If you read Psychology Today articles from back then, that's what it'd say. And what's happened is suddenly the last decade or so, psychologists, researchers have actually started looking through the data related to self-esteem and what happened in the 1980s, mostly even late 70s, with the promotion of self-esteem. And what they found is essentially, just to really sum it up, is that it's just a big ball of baloney. Is that the PG way to say it?
It's crap.
It's ridiculous.
It's crap.
Yeah.
Let's just call it what it is. It's crap.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be too harsh with my language. So in the 80s, maybe even into the 90s, the state of California actually enacted self-esteem training in the schools. It was a school curricula. The state spent zillions of dollars on it, right? And the reason why they did it was because they believed that by improving everyone's self-esteem, they would spend less on basically the cultural ills that come from teenagers. So there would be fewer teen pregnancies, fewer teen suicides, less depression, less crime. If everyone just loved themselves, if everyone felt great about themselves, so if everyone had high self-esteem, then they wouldn't do those things like drugs and crime that would cause the state harm. And what happened was just the opposite. Actually, the higher the self-esteem levels of the people in these schools went, the higher the rates of depression, suicide, drug use, criminal activity, teen pregnancy, right down the list, the higher those numbers became. And so what's really fascinating now is that psychologists are starting actually to come out and say that really all the self-esteem talk was really just a path to creating narcissists who thought they could do whatever they wanted. And in so doing, make themselves happy. But what's happened is they haven't made themselves happy. They're still looking for that next thing. And so that's what leads to the risky behaviors. And so it's a fascinating thing, but really, what I like to say is low self-esteem and high self-esteem are really two sides of the exact same coin. You see, the person with high self-esteem thinks about themselves too much in a good way, or a high way. I shouldn't say a good way, but a positive way, right? They think they're awesome. The person with low self-esteem thinks about themselves too much in a negative way. And I think for a believer, what manifests itself as low self-esteem is the person with low self-esteem almost thinks that they're not good enough for God's grace, Whereas the person with high self-esteem might go to the other side of that and say, I'm too good. Like Jesus didn't need to die for me because I'm already awesome. And so really what happens is low self-esteem and high self-esteem are really both pretty much the same issue. It's an issue of, first of all, thinking about yourself too much, making yourself the center of your own universe. And secondly, thinking that you're outside of the realm of God's grace, which is ridiculous, right? Like you're not too low, like no one's outsinned what God can forgive, and you're not above it. Like we all need his grace. And so yeah, I'm not a big fan of the self-esteem movement. I think it's ridiculous to me because so much research, Neil, has come out now that's debunking it. But I tell you what, if you go into Google right now and you say, how do I fix my body image issues? You'll get about 11 million articles that come up saying you need higher self-esteem. And it's bogus. It's like the data isn't matching what people are talking about in so many ways. It's frustrating for someone who talks about these issues all the time. But yeah, self-esteem, it's just a load of crap.
Pastor's wife saying the word crap. Write that down.
Yeah, I know.
Write that down.
You can keep that.
Write that
keep
down.
that out, please.
But I love what you're saying. I think we were all brainwashed as kids in more ways than one. Yeah. That we just need to have a better self-esteem. We need to have better body image. We need. And what that created in us now as adults is we're like, well, now I need this to fill that need. I need drugs to make me feel better. Or I need, pornography to feel that, whatever. And yeah, so true, about trying to fill stuff with other things for sure.
Yeah. Well, and if you're trying to make your life we were told we were special snowflakes, right? Like that's one of my favorites. Like we're all special snowflakes.
I was never
we're all
told
individual.
that.
You were never told that?
Well,
I'm
not a
sorry.
special snowflake, but I was told I was special in other ways, but yeah, anyway.
But how frustrating is it to live life like thinking you're a special snowflake, you're unique, there's no one else like you. And it's like some of that is true. That's why some of these lies work, right? Because there's enough truth in them to make them stick. But when we're so focused on ourselves and how awesome we are, how ultimately empty that leaves us, right? Because I think we do know at the end of the day that there's something more awesome than us, and that's God. And so just this struggle, this constant internal struggle of trying to prove to ourselves that we're awesome or prove to other people that we're awesome or like inflate ourselves with like an awesome attitude. It's like it just always ends in a bad place. And it's so much easier. I found so much freedom in just resting in the fact that I'm not awesome, but God is. And he made me and he put me on earth to reflect him. And so I don't have to find awesomeness inside of me. I can be good just reflecting his awesomeness. And that's really what he wants me to do here anyway.
Well, that is almost like you're reading my journal if I had one. So thanks for divulging my journal entries now on my own show. That's really awkward because for me, we talked about the Enneagram just super briefly, but as a 4, I'm an individualist. That's what it's all about is, I feel that no one else is like me. I'm special, I'm unique, I'm blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, it's like, I really do struggle with that. Like those are real things. Like I think, I gotta always be doing something better. I gotta always be self-improving. I gotta always, my boss is really good at saying, you're really good at like saying what you need to do better and then going and doing it. I'm like, right. Cause I know what I need to do. I just sometimes suck at doing it. I don't know if suck's a good word or not. I feel bad saying that in front of the pastor's wife, but you know what I mean? So how do we as parents fix that for our kids? Because we were tricked. We were hoodwinked. I like that word. That's one of my favorites. We were hoodwinked as kids into this, it's all about body image and all about, low self-esteem. How do we fix that for our kids and change the focus and change the channel?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep the focus on the truth, and that is the truth of Scripture. That is the truth that Jesus is awesome. Jesus is enough. You probably aren't, and that's okay. That's why you need Jesus. And so, with our kids especially, in some cases, like one of our children is just. He's a perfectionist. He's just hard on himself. And so it's not even us driving him, to do better, but he puts a lot of pressure on himself and just helping him navigate the, okay, what's Jesus asking of you right now? Like, is he the one that's asking you to like get a perfect score on this test? Because it's not your mom and dad. like, why are you putting this pressure on yourself to be better, to do better? Like, where's this coming from? Like, okay, so let's say you do perform perfectly. Like, where does that get you? What do you believe about that? And kind of helping our kids dissect the lies that they hear. Because, for sure, they're hearing a lot of the same lies that we hear. The enemy's using the same bait on everyone, right? And so, our kids are hearing, our young girls, and now even more so young boys are hearing, you need to look more like that guy or that woman, and then you'll have more friends, or you'll have a boyfriend, or you have a girlfriend, or, whatever age or stage they're at where it's appropriate. But they're hearing these same lies that we're hearing. They're feeling the same pressure, and helping redirect them to the truth. And in doing that, kind of dissecting, okay, why? I like to ask the question why a lot. Like, why? Why do you need to do that? Why do you want to do that? And then just kind of dig through the layers. It takes some excavation, especially if your kid's quieter, but digging through the layers and kind of helping them put words to the pressure they feel, or the thoughts that they're hearing, or maybe even pressure that they're hearing from friends or from YouTube stars. Goodness, YouTube's a big influencer in our kids' lives today. And helping them navigate a path where they know how to get past all those lies and know where the only source of truth is. And I believe that comes from God's word.
That's awesome. Great advice there. What's something that you searched for that you never found?
Now I'm singing the song. I still haven't found what I'm looking for in my head.
That's weird because I want to sample that, but I'm afraid we're going to get sued by YouTube. Not YouTube, but YouTube for those kids that are like YouTube. But I don't know what that is. But no, I'm serious. Like that actually resonates with me because that lyric, right? I still haven't found what I'm looking for, right? That's what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, this is going to loop back around to my idols that I was talking about. But I think it's that I haven't found that anything on earth will satisfy me like I thought it was going to satisfy me. And so one real specific example is I wrote this book essentially on body image idolatry, but then a little part of me still thought, once I have a book out, I'll feel better. And so my book got published, and we actually had a deal with Lifeway Books, and they still had the bookstores open. And Lifeway was going to put it on the end cap. It was going to be on the end of every aisle. And I went into my Lifeway bookstore with makeup on, ready to get my picture taken with my book. Right? This was going to be my crowning achievement. And it wasn't there. And so long story short, I have to ask about it. I do the hey, do you happen to have this book? Oh, do you know who it's by? Yeah, I think her name is Heather Creekmore. And so I send the employees on this wild goose chase to find this book. Here it's with the addictions books. I can't even find it. And then eventually it's on the bottom shelf with the books for people who have addiction problems. And I was like, I don't really think that's the right spot for this book. And so then I asked why it wasn't on the end cap, and she's like, oh, I don't know. It's not supposed to be there. And then we did a little more shopping, and eventually the lady's like, oh no, you're right. It actually is supposed to be on end cap. We'll have to change that. We'll get that up next week. And so I leave the store and I'm crushed, right? Even though it should be enough that I have a book published, it should be enough that I have a book in a bookstore because that was really my dream. I'm crushed because I can't get my picture taken with this book. It's not on the end cap. So God deals with me about my idolatry at that point. And I'm like, you know what, God, you're so ridiculous. Why did I think that was going to satisfy me again? Why did I think that writing a book was going to be it? And then a week later, I go back to that same store, makeup on, ready to get my selfie. And God had to teach me the lesson again, because this time that book was on the end cap. But Neil, I tell you, the book was so low that ants could read the title. They had to add a shelf, I guess. It was as low as my shoes. And so the only way I could get a picture with my book would have been to lay my face on the ground to take that picture. So again, I go back to my minivan and I'm just like, wow, God, okay. you're really trying to teach me a lesson here that you don't want me to make this an idol. And so when I think about things I haven't found, think about still not having found what I'm looking for, I really just think about like all these things that I've chased thinking that they would satisfy me, like becoming an author, having that title, and just, recognizing time and again that that really only Jesus can bring the satisfaction I long for. None of these things have done it.
That's hilarious. The whole story, hilarious. I mean, I'm sad for you. Don't get me wrong. Sad for you, but I'm also laughing at you because
please do.
And people are like gonna send me hate mail because I'm laughing at guests again. So there it is. But that was me, not with the end cap and the book and Barnes and Noble and all of that. But my wife started this journey with me, at least the planting of this journey. You need to start a podcast because you need a verbal outlet. I had stepped away from youth ministry at our church, and pretty long, boring story on that, but I was mad and disappointed. That's really the short version of it. And so this is now my outlet for youth ministry. And I thought, if I get into iTunes, I've made it as a podcaster, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone gets into iTunes pretty much. For those that don't know, I need to get on Spotify. Once I make it to Spotify, then I will have arrived as a podcaster. Well, that was pretty easy too. So it's this, again, this moving horizon. And and I struggle so hard with, well, what's the next thing? Mm-hmm. And it used to be downloads. Oh, we need, 120 downloads a show and we will have arrived. Mm-hmm. And then your friend, Michelle, wrecked that for me. So another shout out to Michelle for wrecking my dream. And she said, Neil, it's really about who you're making an impact with, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, thanks for wrecking my day, Michelle. Love you for that. Thank you. But it's true. Yeah. Because I think so many times we chase whatever. Mm-hmm. We want our name in print. We want to feel important. We want this, we want that, we want whatever. And I think, what message does that send to our kids?
Yeah.
That they're not enough? Because how long till they start discovering, well, what if I do this for mom and dad? Is that going to be enough for them? Because clearly it's not enough, because they're on to the next thing. They're watching us. More is caught than taught, pastor once said, which is terrible, but it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I just, as you're saying all this, it's fun to laugh at. It really is. But at the root of it, I get what you're saying. You think you have this expectation of how it's going to go down. And when it's not met, you're then disappointed. I could hear it even through your laughter. I could hear some disappointment in that. Like, no, this is not how I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talk to our kids about idolatry all the time, even in the most basic ways, because I don't know if this happens for you, but like we get in our heads all the Lego sets that we need. And so before Christmas, there's the list of these are the Lego sets we need for Christmas. And then those Lego sets come, some of them, for Christmas. And by, January 3rd, they just released new Lego sets. We need new Lego sets, and we need this Lego set, and or we have Christmas money that we can spend, and we want to get this new Lego set. And so we talk in very real, tangible ways that our kids can understand about, like, just the idolatry involved there. Like, okay, hey, you thought that this Lego set you were getting for Christmas was going to satisfy you, make you happy, and you have it put together, and you mean it's not enough for you? And they're like, well, no, it's already put together. And like, well, wait, but you said it was going to make you happy. Well, yeah, it did. But now I need this one. And then I'll be happy. But wait, isn't the truth that you'll only be happy until you get that one built and play with it for a couple minutes, and then you're going to need the next one? And so we spend a lot of time showing them just these really simple examples of idolatry in their lives, with the hope that someday when they face bigger crises, like writing a book and not having it be where it's supposed to be in the bookstore, they will be able to recognize it more clearly as, that's an idol. Those are some of the ways we try to just prepare our kids for that, which we know they're going to have to face at some point, because we all do, right?
Yeah, I mean, totally. And that's the part I think I was trying to get to as well, is just this idea of we got to get out of our own way sometimes and really examine and sit quiet, and which is extremely hard to do, but sit quiet and say, hey, what's in my life that I need to really get rid of? And why am I playing that comparison game? Because it's too easy to do it. It's too easy. So last question, then we're going to play a game together, because games are fun, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I love fun. I'm
All
a
right.
7.
That's true. You're a 7. So there we are. So after hearing everything that we talked about today, right, what is your hope that someone takes away?
Oh, I love that question, because I really hope that if someone's listening and they just, and actually I'm going to go to body image, because it might be comparison, but I feel specifically that women and men who have struggled with hearing negative thoughts about the way they look, and the pressure to always make themselves look better, and, you know, be it through diets or exercise or unhealthy means, trying to alter their appearance. I just really hope that someone listening today, if that's been their struggle, that they would know that there is hope, that those voices that you hear in your head constantly, those comparison thoughts, that nagging, that really for me, it was just a mental flurry that no one would have known was going on. I mean, I didn't talk to anyone about it, but just this secret conversation in my head that was constantly just dominating my thoughts 24 hours a day, even in my dreams. I mean, if that is your struggle today, my friend, I just want you to know that that does not have to be your normal, that there is hope to be rid of all that, and that you can be free. It's possible, and it's attainable. And I think that's what God wants for you. That would be my hope.
Awesome. I love that so much. So here's our game. We like to play a game called Senseless, and it's just a really fun game that we like to end the show with. So you're not here, so we're going to have to roll on your behalf. So here we go. We're going to roll for you.
Okay.
And you got a number 1, which kind of fits perfectly into what we've been talking about. I love it when that happens. So how do you want others to see you?
Ooh, I want others to see me as real, as genuine, you know, as someone who's not afraid to be themselves.
Has that been a struggle? Has that been a struggle in the? No, that's fine. I just had a follow-up question. Has that been a struggle in the past?
Yeah, I think so, because like I said earlier, like I've very much felt like at certain points in my life, especially, that I needed people needed to think I was perfect. Especially when my husband first became a pastor, oh my word, I wore this like I need to be the perfect pastor's wife thing. I don't know where it came from.
You played
exactly.
the piano, right?
Yeah, well, I was like, I don't play the piano.
Oh,
I'm
my
not going to
goodness.
be singing any specials.
What?
You know, and I know, seriously.
I mean, how do you even call yourself a pastor's wife, really?
Exactly. Sure? And I was worried about like what my kids wore to church, right? Because everyone was going to be looking at them because they're the pastor's kids. And, you know, what did I wear to church? I had to change clothes about 7 times every Sunday morning. And, you know, we all had to walk in there like we were, you know, a row of angels or something. I mean, just all this ridiculous pressure that I had on myself and really on my kids too, to be this ideal pastor's family. And it's been a work that God's done to free me from all of that, and just allow me to just, okay, we're just going to be real here. We're just going to relax about this. And it's been so much better that way.
That's so good. I forgot to tell you when we started, don't hang up when we close out, because I want to do something with you off air. So, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So, that's cool stuff, because I wonder about that too. Like I was a pastor for all of like 5 minutes. There's a story there too, but my daughter was really young, like a baby when I was pastoring. And so she doesn't really remember any of that, luckily and thankfully, but she didn't have to grow up in that fishbowl. But I am really good friends with our old pastor's son, and he was actually on an episode we did together. And talking about drug addiction and how he was like lacking encouragement and just had a very dark moment in his life, calling his dad on Father's Day from jail, how he'd gotten busted for drugs and all of that. So when you say all that, it resonates with me so much that people have this image and this perception of that's how you're supposed to be. And I love that you're dispelling that and just saying, no, this is who we are. We want to be real. We want to be honest. And that's who we are. So that's just fantastic stuff. So last thing, how can people find your book and how can people reach you and hear more about you?
Sure. Well, they can connect with me through my website at comparedtowho.me. And both books eventually will be on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or all the places you can find Christian books, christianbook.com. They're both there. Compared to Who is there now. Burden of Better should be up pretty soon for pre-sale. But you can find all that there. You can find my podcast, which is just called Compared to Who. You might be sensing a theme. And then I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, all the places, although I don't tweet very much. But that's Compared to Who as well. So I would love to connect with anyone listening.
Absolutely. And we, of course, will link all of that in our show notes. So, Heather, thank you so much for coming on today. We value you and value what you've given us today. Just amazing stuff. And just thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. My pleasure. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So we'll close with that, guys. And I just want to say, just as we do so often, remember when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. On behalf of Garrett and myself, we want to say thank you so much for joining us this week. And of course, stay tuned till next week as we walk in other people's shoes. Thank you for joining us on Other People's Shoes. I am so privileged and blessed to do this show each and every week. Want to thank my guest one more time, Heather Creekmore. Guys, go check out her stuff if you're interested. The books, again, to take a look at are Compared to Who and Burden of Better. Burden of Better, of course, coming out later this year, and we're excited to link all of that for you in our show notes. And to catch up with Heather, we, of course, have included her information as well. Great insight, great perspective today. I love the fact that she just gave us so much good stuff. Too much to mention, but guys, worth every moment we had with her. Speaking of moments, take a listen to this little clip of next week's guest. That is right. We're going to be sitting down with a very powerful woman. She has a voice and a very different perspective than ours. Isn't that what it's all about? Stay tuned till next week when you hear a different perspective than what most people have. Can't wait to share that with you. Speaking of next week, we, of course, have a new show that comes out each and every week, every Wednesday. So for past, present, and future episodes, of course, remember opspodcast.com. That, of course, where past, present, and future episodes are available to you each and every Wednesday. We, of course, would love to hear what you think about what we're doing or love to maybe interact with you. So if you'd like to do that, we have a text and voicemail line, and that can be reached at 203-548-7463. That's 203-548-7463. If you're interested in sending us a text or leaving us a voicemail, we, of course, would love to hear from you on that. We, of course, are always on the hunt and the search and the compass and the map and maybe some guidance and a quest to find the next guest. So if that's you, that number that I just mentioned, 203-548-7463, that is a great way to get in touch with us if you would like to be a guest on a future episodes of Other People's Shoes. Speaking of reaching out to us, we, of course, would love to reach out to you and interact with you on social media. We, of course, have 3 platforms that we operate in: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find us all under all 3 of platforms, if you will, under OPS Podcast Show. So please come join us there. Each and every day we do post, and we would love to interact with you there. Speaking of interacting, we, of course, would like to invite you back next Wednesday when all this begins again. Remember, guys, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. On behalf of Garrett and myself, I want to wish you a great week and a blessed week. Hopefully you can join us back here on Wednesday as we try on other people's shoes.